Ladies, let me tell you something. You are not broken because they left. You are not weak because you gave everything. And you are not foolish because you believed in love. You are powerful. And that power, that light, that grace, that empathy you carry in your spirit, that is exactly why they were drawn to you. See, narcissists don't come for the weak. They don't waste their time on the passive or the he and share. No, ma'am, they hunt for the women who glow in dark rooms, the women who can take pain and turn it into poetry, the women who can hold their own in a boardroom but still know how to hold space for someone's heart. That's who you are. You, the nurturer, the fighter, the one who listens too long, loves too hard, and forgives too deep. That is who the narcissist targeted, not because you were easy to manipulate, but because your light was something they could never generate on their own. Let me break it down to you like this. Narcissists are starving for something they can't produce internally: empathy, humility, compassion, vulnerability. And when a powerful woman walks into their orbit radiating those qualities, they don't see a person, they see a battery, a power source, something to feed on. And at first they'll flatter you, they'll mirror you, they'll make you feel seen like never before because they are masters of illusion. But listen to me, it is not love when someone only loves you in the reflection of themselves. That's a performance, not partnership. You weren't chosen because you were weak. You were chosen because you were the strongest woman they could reach. The kind of woman who stays up late to help others solve their problems even when no one checks on her. The kind of woman who gets up every morning with dreams stitched into her bones and still finds time to encourage somebody else. The kind of woman who cries in the shower, dries her face, and walks out smiling. That's power, and that's why they came. Narcissists don't want equal, they want mirrors. They want someone who bends, not someone who breaks the cycle. And when you started asking questions, when you stopped laughing at the manipulation, when you finally drew a line, they called you crazy, too sensitive, hard to love. But listen to me, hard to manipulate is not the same as hard to love. You were never too much. You were just too real for someone who survives off illusion. That breakup, that betrayal, that silent punishment, it wasn't about your worth. It was about your awakening. Because once a powerful, empathetic woman sees the game, she stops playing. She stops shrinking. She stops begging people to meet her at the level of honesty she lives by every single day. Ladies, I know you stayed too long. I know you loved with every fiber of your soul. I know you forgave what should have been deal breakers. But let me remind you that says everything about your heart and nothing about your weakness. Empathy is not weakness, it's a superpower. But baby, even superwomen need boundaries. Narcissists don't just fall in love with your beauty or your laughter. They fall in love with your ability to carry the weight of two people's emotions. They test how much of yourself you're willing to abandon just to keep them close. And for a while, maybe you did. Maybe you walked on eggshells. Maybe you bent until you cracked, but you never broke. Because somewhere deep inside, a voice kept whispering, this is not love. This is survival. And you were born for more than survival. Let me tell you why they couldn't stand you once you woke up. Because when a narcissist loses control of an empathetic woman, she becomes dangerous, not to others, but to the narrative they tried to control. You stopped reacting. You stopped explaining. You stopped defending yourself against accusations that never made sense. And in your stillness, you reclaimed your power. You learned that silence is not weakness, it is strategy. That not responding is not surrender, it is sovereignty. You started asking, what do I want? Not what do I need to do to be enough for someone who never intended to love me fully. And that right there is when the spell broke. Because you were never under their spell, you were under the illusion that your worth was tied to their validation. But you woke up, you remembered who you were before they made you doubt it. You started nurturing yourself with the same love you once poured into someone who only drank it up without ever refilling your cup. That kind of awakening is terrifying to a narcissist because now you see the difference between connection and control, between chemistry and chaos, between intensity and intimacy. And you no longer confuse being needed with being loved. Let me say this louder for the women in the back. You don't need to earn someone's love by sacrificing yourself. You don't need to explain your heart to someone committed to misunderstanding it. You don't need to set yourself on fire just to keep someone else warm. You are not their savior. You were not put on this earth to rehabilitate broken people at the cost of your own soul. You can love people without losing yourself in the process. And listen, I know heartbreak hurts, especially when you realize the person you trusted was in love with your light but plotting to dim it the whole time. But that pain is where your power is reborn. That grief, it's sacred because buried inside it is the resurrection of your boundaries, your truth, your clarity. You are not the same woman who tolerated what you once did, and that is your miracle. You don't have to be angry to be free. You don't have to be bitter to move on, but you do have to be honest about the fact that loving someone who refuses to grow is spiritual starvation. Honest about the fact that manipulation disguised as romance is still manipulation. And honest about the fact that your future deserves people who don't see your heart as a weakness to exploit, but as a gift to honor. Let them say you changed. Let them say you're distant, difficult, too much. You are allowed to be too much for people who were never enough for you. You are allowed to reclaim your time, your space, your dreams. You are allowed to say, not this time, not with this heart, not again, because the real glow up isn't just external, it's internal. It's the peace that comes from no longer chasing closure and chaos. It's the power that comes from knowing the love you were begging for now belongs to you. Ladies, your empathy is gold, but gold doesn't belong in every hand. So from now on, let them earn it. Let them rise to meet you. Let them demonstrate consistency, honesty, and emotional maturity. And if they can't, that's not your loss, it's your liberation. Because a powerful, empathetic woman who knows her worth is a revolution. And baby, you are the revolution. So walk away with your head high. Let your silence speak. Let your healing roar louder than your pain. Let your joy confuse those who thought you'd be broken. And when the day comes, and it will, when someone real sees you, values you, respects you, and stands beside you as an equal, you'll realize that losing a narcissist was never the heartbreak, it was the breakthrough. And when the breakthrough happens, when the veil is lifted and you finally see what you were protecting, what you were investing in, what you were trying to save, it humbles you, not in shame, but in wisdom. Because now you understand that love without integrity is not love, it's performance. And empathy without boundaries isn't compassion, it's self-neglect dressed up as devotion. You begin to see patterns not just in others, but in yourself. You notice the way you used to overextend, over-explain, overcompensate, hoping your loyalty would inspire their change. But the truth is, you can't raise a grown person. You can't teach someone to cherish what they only learn to consume. You can't force someone to see your worth when they benefit from your doubt. So you stop. You stop showing up to conversations where your voice isn't heard. You stop handing out second chances to people who never valued the first. You stop searching for softness in places that have only ever weaponized your kindness. Because healing is not just about moving on, it's about moving up. It's about elevating your standards, your peace, your energy. It's about refusing to rent out sacred parts of your spirit to people who treat them like temporary shelters. It's knowing the difference between being lonely and being whole. And you don't apologize anymore. Not for taking up space, not for saying no, not for choosing yourself, not for the days you block, delete, disappear. Not to be petty, but to protect your growth. Because you've learned that closure doesn't come from the people who broke you. It comes from the woman who finally stopped asking why and started declaring no more. You see, a narcissist thrives in confusion, in blurred lines, in emotional fog, in your willingness to rewrite reality just to keep the fantasy alive. But once your vision clears, once you remember your intuition is your most sacred compass, you become untouchable, not cold but clear, not hard but healed, not bitter but boundary. That clarity, that's the scariest thing to someone who can't manipulate you anymore, because now your love is no longer for sale, your compassion is no longer automatic, your time is no longer open access, and your heart, that heart once wide open to anyone with a sad story, now knows the power of discernment. Let's be real. Some people will call your healing selfish. They'll say you changed, that you're not nice anymore. But what they really mean is that you're no longer convenient, no longer a sponge for their drama. no longer a canvas for their projections, no longer a participant in your own mistreatment. And that is not selfish, that is sacred, because the healed version of you doesn't need to prove her worth to anyone. She doesn't fight to be understood. She doesn't chase people who walk away. She doesn't beg for closure. She doesn't explain peace to those addicted to chaos. Instead, she rises, she rebuilds, she reclaims, she radiates. And when love comes again, and it will feel safe. It will feel steady. It will not trigger survival mode. It will not test your loyalty with games. It will not drain you. It will nourish you, because the next version of love you allow into your life will match the level of love you now give to yourself. That's the reward. But hear me when I say this. Before the reward comes, the wilderness of being alone, the silence after detachment, the ache of walking away without the closure you deserve. That space is hard, but it's holy, because it's where you learn to love yourself out loud, to take yourself on dates, to celebrate your wins, to sit with your thoughts and not run from them, to meet your reflection and say, I kept you safe, I brought you back, I never gave up on you. And that, my sister, is the revolution they never saw coming. Because a woman who survives a narcissist and still chooses to love again, not just others, but herself, is a woman who can't be broken, not by games, not by gaslighting, not by guilt. She's not hardened. She's honed. She's not defensive. She's discerning. She's not seeking validation. She's embodying truth. And her presence, it shifts rooms, because she no longer waits to be chosen. She chooses herself. She's no longer afraid of walking away. She's afraid of losing herself again. And so she protects her joy like treasure. She guards her energy like gold. She makes no apologies for expecting the kind of love she gives, intentional, present, accountable, because now she knows love is not supposed to hurt. It is not supposed to confuse. It is not supposed to make you doubt your value. Real love, healthy love, is steady. It's honest. It makes you feel seen, not watched, heard, not silenced, held, not handled. That's what she's waiting for now. Not the grand gestures, but the quiet consistency. Not the sweet nothings, but the daily choices. Not the love that performs, but the love that remains. And in the meantime, she thrives. Not because she's over it, but because she's honoring it, honoring the lesson, honoring the growth, honoring the sacred unraveling that led her back to herself. So no, she's not bitter, she's better. And not just better at spotting red flags, better at honoring green ones, better at slowing down, better at listening to her body, better at walking away from what no longer aligns with her purpose. That is the gift of surviving a narcissist. You learn to never again abandon yourself for someone else's comfort. You learn that your softness is not a liability, it's a lighthouse. And from now on, it will only shine for those who arrive with respect, not entitlement. Because a powerful, empathetic woman with boundaries, she is no longer prey, she is the prize. She is the prize, not in arrogance, but in awareness. She no longer entertains confusion disguised as chemistry. She no longer lets potential override pattern. She doesn't gamble her peace on the hope that someone will one day rise to meet her needs. She's not holding auditions. She's building a life. And if someone wants to walk beside her, they better come whole or not at all. She's not impressed by charm anymore. She's looking for consistency, for presence, for accountability, for depth, because she's tasted manipulation dressed as passion, and now she craves something quieter, something stable. She wants love that doesn't make her question her reality, love that doesn't ask her to shrink, love that knows how to hold space, not just take it. You see, narcissists are addicted to attention, but powerful women are no longer interested in being a stage for someone else's performance. She doesn't want spotlight love. She wants soul love, rooted love, love that doesn't run when things get quiet or hard or real. And because of that, she's okay waiting. She's okay walking alone for a while, because alone is not empty, alone is not broken, alone is sacred when it means walking in alignment. She has finally stopped in negotiating with red flags. She no longer explains to grown people how to respect her. She doesn't send reminders to be loved properly. That era is over. Now if someone can't meet her in truth, they don't get access to her heart. And this clarity, it changes how she shows up everywhere. In friendships, she no longer entertains one-sided conversations. If she's always the listener, always the encourager, always the giver, she steps back. She no longer gives out empathy like candy to those who only remember her when it's convenient. In business, she no longer undercharges, over-delivers, or works herself to exhaustion just to prove she's worthy. She knows her value. She sets her price. She takes up space with pride. In family, she no longer plays the peacekeeper at the cost of her own peace. She no longer folds herself to keep old dynamics intact. If being loved means being silent, she's not interested. This woman, the one who once gave chance after chance to the wrong people, is now giving that energy to herself. She pours into her goals. She invests in her healing. She surrounds herself with people who pour back. And if they don't, she doesn't chase. She doesn't convince. She simply exits with grace and never looks back, because she has learned peace is expensive. And now that she has it, she protects it like treasure. She no longer entertains apologies without change. She no longer stays loyal to cycles that drain her. She no longer chooses comfort over growth. She would rather face temporary loneliness than permanent confusion. And you know what happens next? The world starts to respond differently. The doors she once begged to open swing wide on their own. The connections that once felt forced begin to flow effortlessly. The dreams that once felt delayed begin to take root, because she's no longer waiting for permission. She's no longer tolerating almost. She's no longer seeking rescue. She is rescuing herself. She creates boundaries not out of fear, but out of love for herself, for her future, for her freedom. She's not trying to be liked by everyone. She's trying to live a life that feels honest, intentional, and alive. And now she doesn't just recognize narcissists. She repels them, because her energy no longer plays the role of savior. She doesn't light herself on fire to keep someone else warm. She doesn't bleed to prove she's loyal. She's not impressed by breadcrumbs or potential, or sorry said too late. She walks in truth, and truth has a way of making manipulators very uncomfortable. She's not angry, she's aware. She's not cruel, she's clear. She's not guarded, she's guided. This guidance, it comes from within. It comes from every moment she doubted herself and still showed up, from every time she broke down and rebuilt, from every lie she untangled and every mask she saw fall off. It comes from the quiet hours when no one clapped, but she kept going. From the nights she prayed for clarity and woke up with courage. This isn't just healing, it's rebirth. She is no longer available for chaos disguised as passion. She wants peace. She wants depth. She wants softness that doesn't need to be earned. She wants presence without performance. And she knows she can have it, because she's learned to give it to herself first. So now when she walks into a room, she doesn't wonder who will choose her. She already has. She doesn't ask, am I enough? She declares, I am whole. She doesn't seek love to fix the wounds. She brings love to share from the healing. And that shift, that sacred, unstoppable shift, is what makes her powerful. Because the same heart that once cried for attention now rests in self-acceptance. The same woman who once questioned her intuition now moves with conviction. The same soul that once begged for love now walks in it, breathes it, radiates it, without needing to be completed by anyone else. She's not afraid to be misunderstood anymore. She's not bending her truth for acceptance. She's not trading authenticity for approval. If her presence disrupts the dysfunction, so be it. If her healing offends those still committed to cycles, so be it. If her boundaries feel like rejection to those who once exploited her softness, so be it.
She is no longer accessible to people who confuse her kindness for weakness. She is no longer available to relationships that ask her to abandon her essence. She is no longer attached to outcomes that demand her silence because she's building something deeper now, a life rooted in truth, wholeness, and alignment, a life that honors the power of being both tender and strong, a life where love is mutual, not martyrdom, a life where peace is the standard, not the reward. She doesn't just survive anymore, she thrives. And when people ask how she did it, how she went from broken to blooming, from manipulated to magnetic, from doubted to divine, she'll simply smile, because some transformations can't be explained. They can only be lived.
The beauty of her transformation is that it was quiet. No announcements, no grand declarations, just a steady unraveling of what no longer served her, and a gentle rebuilding of everything she once buried beneath compromise. She stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. She stopped hoping people would see her pain and choose to grow. Instead, she chose herself, not out of spite, but out of necessity. And now she understands something most people miss. Self-respect is not a luxury, it's a lifeline. It's not about ego, it's about energy. It's about preserving your emotional home so that only those who honor it may enter. She walks differently now, not faster, not louder, but lighter, because the weight she carried was never hers to begin with. She let go of proving her worth to those who never intended to understand it. She released the need to be explained. She realized that people who misunderstand you intentionally will never comprehend your heart, no matter how many words you use. That revelation gave her peace. And from that peace, she built new standards. She no longer ignores tension to avoid confrontation. She doesn't sugarcoat the truth to keep people comfortable. She doesn't water down her needs. Her honesty isn't sharp, but it is clear. She says what she means what she says, and she doesn't apologize for having expectations that match her level of giving. Because now she's not just choosing love, she's choosing reciprocity, effort, respect. She knows what partnership looks like. It doesn't confuse, it doesn't diminish, it doesn't withhold. It's not unpredictable affection, it's steady presence. It's not charm with conditions, it's authenticity with consistency. And that's what she gives. So that's what she expects. Anything less is a distraction. Anything less is a detour from the life she's building with intention. She no longer pours herself into bottomless cups. She's learned that loving someone should never feel like begging them to value you. That was the old version of her, the one who thought healing them would heal her. But now she knows. Your heart is not a rehab center for people unwilling to do the work. Your love is not medicine for those committed to remaining sick with self-absorption. She has met herself again, and in doing so, she recovered all the parts she gave away to people who never said thank you. She's done accepting crumbs when she's made a feast. She's done filling voids that weren't hers to fill. She's done being a safe space for chaos to land. And now she's not desperate to be chosen. She's discerning about who gets access. Her love is no longer impulsive, it's intentional. No longer automatic, it's sacred. No longer open to those who drain, but reserved for those who reciprocate. And she knows what it cost her to get here. The night she cried herself to sleep, wondering what she did wrong. The time she questioned her worth because someone else couldn't handle her truth. The days she gaslit herself into staying. The months she mistook trauma bonds for soulmate signs. She carries those lessons not as shame, but as sacred armor, because those moments sharpened her awareness. They turned her into a woman who doesn't just survive betrayal, she extracts wisdom from it. Who doesn't just walk away, she walks forward. Who doesn't just let go, she levels up. And now she's not afraid of her own voice. She speaks with purpose. She lives with alignment. She trusts herself in ways she never did before. Because the love she was searching for outside, she found it inside. It's in the way she protects her peace, like a temple. It's in the way she no longer justifies her need. It's in the way she doesn't rush anymore. Not into love, not into explanations, not into spaces where she has to hustle for her humanity. Because rushing always came from fear. Fear of not being enough, fear of being left, fear of being alone. But now she knows anything built from fear will fall. But what's built from truth will remain. And she only wants what remains because she's not interested in fireworks that disappear. She's interested in fires that stay lit. She's interested in presence, in partnership, in peace. The days of performing for love are over. Now she embodies it. And this shift, this sacred realignment, it shows up in everything. She doesn't tolerate flaky energy. If someone's inconsistent, she doesn't chase. She doesn't second guess red flags. She trusts her gut. She doesn't believe words without matching behavior. And she's not impressed by access. She's impressed by effort. She no longer lives in survival mode. She doesn't adapt to dysfunction. She doesn't dim to avoid jealousy. She doesn't self-abandon to keep a relationship. She knows who she is. She knows what she brings. She knows that peace is the highest currency, and so she protects it like royalty. Because when you've survived a narcissist, you don't come out the same. You come out sharper, wiser, more aware. You see the games before they start. You feel the shift in energy before the words are spoken. You hear the silent manipulations in between compliments. You're no longer fooled by a good morning text or a grand gesture after emotional neglect. You know the difference between guilt and love, between control and care, between someone who needs you and someone who sees you. And that kind of wisdom, it sets you free, not just from them, but from every version of you that believed their validation was required to feel whole. You are whole, and nothing, not their silence, not their smirks, not their fake apologies, not their revision of the story, can ever take that from you. You earned this peace. You fought for this clarity. And from this moment forward, you don't shrink for anyone. You rise, not with vengeance in your step, but with vision in your eyes. You rise because you finally understand that your life is not a rescue mission. You were never created to be the emotional crutch for people committed to staying broken. You weren't made to dilute your brilliance for those intimidated by your clarity. You weren't put here to absorb blame that was never yours. You rise because you've remembered the truth. Your softness is not up for exploitation, and your strength is not up for auction. It doesn't need convincing. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't ask, do I deserve this? It declares, this is mine. And now you see relationships through a new lens, not through desperation, but through discernment. You don't care about status anymore. You care about substance. You don't crave constant stimulation. You crave stability. You're not looking for someone to complete you. You're building a life that's already full. And anyone who comes along now has to bring peace, not chaos. Because you've learned how expensive chaos is. It robs you of time, energy, creativity, and most dangerously, self-trust. You remember how many nights you stayed up overthinking what you could have done better when it was never your burden to fix. You recall how many times you sacrificed your needs just to keep a false peace. You gave silence in moments when you should have spoken. You gave compassion in moments when you should have walked away. And yet, you're not bitter. You're better equipped. You're not afraid of red flags anymore. You don't try to repaint them. You don't spiritualize toxicity. You don't label neglect as healing in progress. You recognize neglect for what it is, a choice, a refusal to show up, a pattern of inconsistency that no longer seduces you. Now you read energy. You listen to what isn't said. You trust that uneasiness in your gut instead of talking yourself out of it. You let people show you who they are. You don't build potential in your mind. You observe patterns in real time. That's wisdom. That's growth. That's the freedom that comes from learning that love isn't proven through pain, that forgiveness doesn't require re-entry, that protecting your peace sometimes means disappointing others, and that's okay. You no longer feel guilty for putting yourself first. You don't justify why you need time alone. You don't explain why you walked away. You don't over-explain your healing,
because healing isn't for them, it's for you. And it doesn't have to be pretty. Sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's messy, sometimes it's lonely, but always it's worth it. Now you're creating boundaries as acts of love, not walls out of fear. You understand that boundaries don't keep the right people out, they keep you in alignment. You understand that people who get offended by your standards were benefiting from your lack of them. So you're not scared of losing people anymore. If someone walks away when you speak your truth, let them. If someone disappears when you stop overgiving, let them. If someone resents your growth, that's not your problem to fix. You're not shrinking back into the woman who needed approval to feel safe. You're not retreating to the version of yourself who tolerated crumbs and called it a feast. That version was doing the best she could. Honor her, but don't go back to her, because your expansion is sacred.
It took battles no one saw. It took nights where you cried on the bathroom floor but still got up and faced the world with grace. It took realizing that you were the one you were waiting for, that your future didn't require rescuing. It required remembering your worth, remembering your boundaries, remembering that love is not supposed to feel like an emotional roller coaster with no brakes. And now everything is different. You make decisions from peace, not panic. You create from overflow, not obligation. You rest without guilt. You say no without explanation. You walk away from what doesn't align even when it's hard, even when your heart is still catching up to your wisdom, because you know that staying somewhere you've outgrown just to avoid discomfort is a slow form of self-abandonment. And that's no longer a price you're willing to pay. So now you rise every day knowing this. Anyone who cannot meet you in mutual respect, emotional accountability, and soul-level presence simply does not have a seat at your table. No matter how long they've been around, no matter how charming they seem, no matter how intense the connection once felt, because intensity without intimacy is not love. Passion without protection is not partnership. And connection without safety is not a safe space. You deserve safe love. You deserve love that doesn't punish you for speaking your truth. You deserve love that sees your strength and doesn't try to compete with it, but honors it. You deserve someone who knows how to lead themselves before they try to lead you. And until that shows up, you're not waiting. You're not pausing your purpose. You're not silencing your dreams. You're not suspending your joy. You're living fully, fiercely, freely, because you've survived what was meant to destroy you. And you didn't just survive, you evolved. You stopped settling. You stopped justifying abuse with potential. You stopped playing small to keep others comfortable. You stopped calling dysfunction fate. And now you walk in a different kind of power, not the kind that needs applause, not the kind that posts everything online, not the kind that shouts, but the kind that rests, the kind that glows, the kind that knows. You are no longer chasing closure. You've given it to yourself. You are no longer proving your worth. You walk in it. You are no longer sacrificing your peace. You've crowned it. This is your era of alignment, where your yes means yes, your no means no. Your energy speaks before your mouth does. And your presence reminds every room, this woman has returned to herself. And nothing is more powerful than that.